Welcome everyone. My name is Shawn Sullivan. I am the animation teacher here at Sheldon High School that we like to call K9 Studios. This is Karen Nylund. We team teach. She's the Film is Lit teacher here, so I'm team teaching over at the English department. And this is our artist in residence who's working this year with our students, Samantha Skyler. She's a professional artist that pretty much dabbles in a little bit of everything, and she's going to share what she does. Tonight we're dealing with creativity. It's a topic that deals with SEVAs, trying to find new ways for you to come up with stories and new ways to approach doing stories. So we really want to start pushing you in your creative juices. But before we get going there, I want to know who I have in my audience here. How many people here say, I am a filmmaker? Show of hands. What? All right, you've made a film, you're a filmmaker. There you go. I love it. I love it. How many people here that say I'm a teacher and want to find a way to incorporate this into my classroom some way, somehow? Fantastic. How many people just say, I'm a fan and I'm here to get free food tonight?
At least they're honest.
There you go. All right. That's why I'm here. So, all right. I would like to hand it over to Samantha Skyler. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. She is, this year, she has come into the studio to work with my students on a film. She's also opened up her studio where she hired 4 of my students for an internship. She has projects that she does all over the place, constantly traveling around. We're very lucky that we get her here tonight. So she made some room for us. But one thing that ended up happening, I was out all last year. I had hip replacements done last year. And she came in and taught my class for what, 6, 7 weeks? Yeah. So I got her for 6, 7 weeks, and she did this wonderful lesson that dealt with creativity. And I wanted to share that with you guys. And it's her specialty with her own artwork. It's called mashups, and I'll let her explain all that to you guys. And we're going to do some mashups to start us off. Yes. All right, it's all yours, Sam.
Awesome. So thank you so much for everyone being here tonight. As Sully said, I'm a professional artist, and I actually was not supposed to go to Sheldon, but I graduated in 2006. And I came here because of the amazing program that Sullivan built here. And honestly, the foundation that I gained and the knowledge that I learned here actually helps me every single day in my professional job. And I've worked with companies such as Hot Topic, Her Universe, Ubisoft, and Espionage Cosmetics, and all of those companies. And I learned so much of just learning how to be professional, and once again, just learning that here in the studio. So getting that foundation really helped me, and I learned a lot about mashups. So when I was teaching here for those couple of weeks, this lesson really opened up the kids' minds about looking at things in a new perspective, about taking characters and how can we incorporate those into our own concepts and really let our imagination grow. So I'm going to share that with you guys tonight. Okay. While we're getting set up, I'm going to actually talk a little bit about what else that I do. So after I graduated from Sheldon, I noticed that a lot of things were changing with social media. And I realized that every person is their own brand and their own company, and that they can start that now. Platforms like Instagram, Facebook are ways to connect with others and really establish a connection. So I started using YouTube as my own personal media, and I started making my own videos, progress videos of my artwork. And it started picking up, and I would share airbrushing videos, tutorials, and that's actually how I got contacted by Assassin's Creed, Borderlands, all these video game companies. They found me on YouTube and contacted me through Twitter, which feels really kind of weird because you don't expect that. But nowadays, that's where a lot of the companies are going. They're looking for artists who have a passion, and these content creators are using these social media tools. So that's actually how I started really building this audience, and that's what I do for a living. I make stuff on YouTube. And it sounds really weird to say that because when I graduated, YouTube wasn't even around yet. So it feels weird to have that. And so I started doing that, and then I am actually currently doing a Kickstarter because I realized I love connecting with people and I want to make an art book. And what happens is every supporter actually gets to vote on what content that they want to see, because the world is changing in the fact that it's not just you telling people or showing people, it's connecting and growing and basically building a really strong foundation and fan base. but it's all about connecting. And so that kind of still plays into the mashup scenes as well, as how can we take things and build something together. So one of the lessons that I brought to the classes, just kind of a fun exercise, was I got lots of different animals, and they had to pull 2 animals and put them together. And it was they were really intimidated at first because I found animals that I knew they wouldn't know. They couldn't even pronounce them. And the whole concept was that they would have to go out and research, what is this animal? Is it sea life? Does it live on land? By doing that, they could use tools like Google, which you can find anything on Google, and they would look up animals and really get to know them and put these 2 together. So one of the kids actually picked one for me. So I got a clownfish and an ostrich, and I somehow had to make them work together. So that was one example that I did. A lot of the kids were intimidated at first, but when we broke things down into shapes, they were able to really see how you can build on top of that. And then from there, their imagination just took off, and they started naming their own animals. What does it eat? Where does it live? And they started really trying to find ways to think about, how can we still make this creature still feel like it could exist in the real world? So for instance, this student got a moose and a spider, and she was really kind of scared at first, but I told her, break things down. What elements do you like from this creature to put them together? And from there, they started looking at animal designs and concept designs in a new way. So this was hers. This one, I believe he got some form of like a bear and an eagle. And this student had an opossum, and I think it was like a weird poisonous snake. And so then they ended up having to think about color theory and think about all of the different ideas. And so what I would have them do is break things down into shapes, and then take the 2 shapes that they like and start combining them together. And then from there, that's when they continued to explore. The greatest thing about this lesson that I found out from these students was they wanted to end up doing more and build like almost their own zoo of these interesting creatures. And it really helped bring some of the students out of their shell a little bit, because they felt that they could be imaginative, but still had some guidelines of what they could use to go forward. So I'm going to do a really quick demo to share with you guys how to make your own creatures, but breaking things down once again into very simple shapes so you can evolve the creature and watch it evolve and grow on paper. So with this, I want you guys to pick 2 animals. It doesn't matter, just pick 2 of the favorite animals that speak to you on the page and look at them. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to take elements and grab them together. Yes, so this whole lesson is just to be an exercise to get creative and start thinking of different character designs in a new perspective. So pick your 2 favorite animals and circle them on the page.
Yep. And we gave you a piece of white paper. This one right here. We're going to start you off here, where you're just putting together the shapes. Don't worry about drawing. Don't worry. Just find a way to put them together, and even just go through it. Like if you're going to do ladybug and bear, you got a lady bear. And if you go through and say a kangaroo and alligator or a crocodile, you got a crocogrew. So have fun creating your characters. And this is a process that we do in animation, coming up with character design. It's not about being refined. It is about being rough and quick and just developing things and letting the creative juices flow. We found that if we start here with just fun ways of putting animals together, it starts opening the mind up more for us to be able to be even more creative. And that's the key tonight, is that we want you to be creative tonight. So don't hold back.
And once again, there's no rules. Just have fun. Take elements that you want, because that is what we're trying to do, is just express creativity. And you can find ways of doing that. Once again, looking at animals that we're kind of already familiar with, but putting them in a new light, and how can we have fun with this? And a lot of times, this is what a lot of concept artists do when they're given a prompt for a movie and they have to design an alien world. They start looking at what already exists in our world and what elements can we pull out and put into these creatures. So that way it still has kind of this connection to them. So once you guys have your animals, I can start. So I'm gonna pick a crocodile and a giraffe because crocodiles scare me. So I'm gonna try to get over my fear tonight and work on a crocodile. So as you can see, we can start looking at the shapes of your creature and start building on those shapes. Just like the student did over here, you can start building circles and start drawing the shapes of that creature. So for my crocodile, sometimes the things to think about is like, what elements do I want to have more of a crocodile body or maybe a giraffe body? And these are things that you can start playing around and have fun with. So I'm going to just focus on the circle and oval elements of the crocodile first. So I'm going to start with an oval for his body. And start building in some of those shapes. But something that I think, and this is what I would tell the students about, is what makes that animal, when you think about it, what's the first thing that you think of? So for me, when I say giraffe, I think of its long neck. So that's something that I want to incorporate into my creature. So for instance, if you have a camel, what's the first thing you think of? Oh, maybe it's the way his back is shaped. Or same thing with an elephant, maybe it's its trunk. So by looking at these animals and having to make your own, it is intimidating, but if you take elements that you first think of, you can actually start applying it to make the animal feel organic. So I really like the giraffe's neck, so that might be something I might want to try to add to my alligator creature. And sometimes it will take multiple sketches, but the whole concept is just to get something down on paper first. So I'm going to use more of that long neck for his body. But I still want to keep kind of that crazy, weird, long mouth that the alligator has. And so you just start adding and building the shapes on top of one another. So what's another thing that a giraffe might have that you think of besides its neck? Maybe it's its horns or ears. Maybe that's something I can incorporate for him too. So I'm going to give him some little ears and the same kind of horns. I'll just give him a little eye. I'm going to make him look a little more cartoony. But maybe we'll make him a little mean too. So we can arch his eyebrow up and give him some teeth. Try to make this smaller. Once again, think about building shapes. Okay, well, he's going to need a tail because he's kind of getting a little lopsided here. So what I want to do is think about, okay, well, could I give him an alligator tail or maybe a giraffe tail? Or maybe we can combine the two. Because once again, there's no rules with this. It's just about having fun and expressing our creativity. So I think I'm going to somehow combine the two tails together. Maybe you can start off as a little more of like a reptile tail. And then I think giraffes kind of have like hair at the end of theirs. And most of the time I would actually research and I'd tell the kids to look up these kind of creatures so when you can actually see what is their anatomy like. But since I'm just trying to do a quick demo with you guys, we can just have fun and make up our own. And so something else, when you think giraffe, I think of its print, right? It kind of stands out and it's very bold, so maybe I can start adding in some of those too.
Yep. So. I think it's looking good. I walked around the room, Sam, saw some of the wonderful artwork that's here. This is just a way for us just to get moving creatively, just putting ideas together quickly and not worrying. One of the biggest problems with any of my young artists is that they always fear right out of the gate, like, I don't know how to do this. And it's just like, you don't know how to pick two animals and just make up an imaginary animal. Mm-hmm. We also have them do writings about this animal.
Yes, yeah.
So it helps them start creating story. The topic that we're going to be focusing on today is creative expression. It is a category in the SEVAs. So this is just a way for the kids to find a character very quickly, and here we draw everything. It's animation. So we go back to the traditional way of how Disney used to do it. We actually use the principles of animation from Disney. And, but we also started doing live action, and that's with Miss Nylund here has brought that in. And we came together and we did a project. We're team teaching right now. I have my beginning animation class, and she has her film as Lit's class. And we ended up creating a project today where we're going to go through and show you. We take an inanimate object, and we do it in storyboard form, where eventually it gets pushed out as what's called a story reel. So it is a movie with just images. There's no, and then you can use your cell phone to take these pictures. You can draw them if you want. It's up to you how you want to approach it, but we're going to go through that process. And I'm going to send Sam around to take a look at some of your drawings, and I'm going to have Miss Nylund start talking about camera angles. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Is that where you're at?
No.
No,
I'm going to start with story first.
Story.
Yes.
Story.
So,
Everything starts with story.
Sully just let you know, one of the commonalities in his classroom is that when people come into his classroom, they expect to come in and draw. They have all of the cool equipment. They get to come in and practice their drawing skills, practicing their animation skills. Well, in my class, the students that come to me typically are the ones that really love watching movies, and they want to understand how movies get made. They want to understand how to write a strong film story. But the biggest difference between our kids is that my students, typically are terrified when you ask them to draw a picture. And they are exactly like their instructor when it comes to that. So when I'm walking around watching how everybody is doing this, I'm thinking, there's no way I would be able to pull that off in just a couple of minutes. So that's something that we've been working on as well, trying to break my students through this fear of thinking that they don't know how to draw, which you have actually helped me figure out, that even if the only thing I can do is stick figures, I can still convey an idea, and I can still tell a story with stick figures. And I'm really, I mean, it looks to me like everybody in here knows how to draw, so I may be the lone the lone stick figure artist in the room. But the point being, my role in what we are doing team teaching is talking to our students about how all stories basically start the same way. That almost every story can be placed in a very classical narrative paradigm. You know, all of us who have been through school at some point, we've learned about plot pyramids. We've learned about this idea that all stories can be placed into this paradigm of somebody wanted something or somebody wanted something. Something or somebody gets in that person's way or that thing's way, so that that person or thing has to do something, and then something has to happen after that. And it's so vague, but it's essentially the way that every story gets started. We have some kind of exposition, something has to happen, a character has to want something, there has to be conflict, whether it's internal conflict or external conflict, there has to be complications, and the action has to rise to what most of us understand as a climax, the turning point of our story, and then it has to resolve somehow. And what we have been showing our students is various ways that you can apply this paradigm. You can apply this paradigm to Star Wars. You can apply this paradigm to Little Red Riding Hood. You can apply it to Pixar shorts. And so what we wanted our students to do was to tell a story from the perspective of an inanimate object. And so to give you an example, we all have to make decisions in our everyday lives, right? We make decisions about what shoes we're going to wear. We make decisions about what we're going to eat for breakfast. And so what I asked my students was, how do you think the object that you didn't choose feels every day when you don't choose that certain pair of shoes, or when you don't choose to eat the certain breakfast? If that inanimate object had feelings, what would it say? And this whole concept is basically where Toy Story came from. What happens when the favorite toy is replaced on a birthday party? How does that toy feel? What happens to that toy's self-esteem when he suddenly goes from being the favorite toy to being the toy that is cast aside? And so we talk to our students about that and say, okay, pick an inanimate object and let's figure out what that inanimate object wants. I'm basically just trying to drive home the idea that every story follows this same paradigm. Somebody wants something, but something gets in his or her way. So that person has to do something. And the longer the story, the more complications that arise, the more things that get in that person's way. Until finally something has to happen to change the structure. We don't have to write all this down. Something has to happen to change all of the structure. There needs to be a turning point, and then the falling action down to the resolution. And what the two of us have been working on is, once our students have it all written down on paper, which is basically their concept, their pitch for their story, how do they figure out how to tell this story visually? And that's where storyboarding comes in.
Yeah, so storyboarding, that's my passion. So storyboarding is also known as story reboarding. You do it over and over and over. Can someone tell me why you would actually storyboard out a film? Why would they go through the process of drawing every single shot? Who here likes a storyboard?
I'm not a storyboard, but film is expensive and time is money.
That's it.
So you got to plan out before you take the first shot.
You plan everything first, every single shot. It is much more affordable to draw out the shots and set up where the camera's going to be and who's framed how and so on. Actually, when they're even storyboarding, a lot of storyboards that you guys actually see are not even the real storyboards that are done for the films. For like Monster Inc., for Sully and Mike, it was really just a rectangle and a circle. That's all they did every single time. And you know by that rectangle who is Sully, and you know by the circle who is Mike. And you were able to place things in proper location and have it framed, and you're juggling acting, and you're dealing with composition. You're dealing with all these things first before you have people on set going, what are we going to do? And you work it out over and over and over to be able to tell your basic story. We do storyboarding so much in here, we end up doing where it's turned into what's called a story reel. That your storyboard should be able to, where I can push play and it's properly timed out per shot, and you should be able to watch the film like a slideshow and understand exactly what's happening. If anyone watches a story reel and you have no clue what's going on it, then it's not going to be clear when you show up on set to film your movie. So you spend that time working that all out. You don't have to be a fantastic artist, but who here can draw a circle, at least a circle? Who here can draw a rectangle? That's all you really need to be able to do. You can identify those characters through those basic shapes. And that is the foundation of animation. It's all off of shapes. You saw with Sam when she was teaching you how to draw, breaking down the shape concepts. There's a thing called shape theory, where you can just deal with your basic characters. If you want someone cute, lovable, and enjoyable to be around, it is circles, like Mike. If you want someone strong and dependable, it's rectangles, like Sully. And if you want the villain, what shape do you think? Triangle. We don't like points. I gave it away right there. Points make us uncomfortable. So just doing basic shapes can get across in a storyboard what the character is. How far you want to push the storyboards is up to you and what you want to convey. So we gave you in your handouts knick-knack. All the beats to the film is all in your handouts here. Breaking this all down to the seconds on how long they're on the screen. What we did here is what's called thumbnails. And I believe in storyboards so much. One thing, I gave all of you our storyboards that we use here at the studio. There's a bunch of handouts for you to take home with you. Different styles of storyboards. But there are basic things that you need to have on a storyboard. One, you need your screen, your stage. That is where the actors are going to be within your frame shot. The world lives beyond this frame, but it allows you to see what's exactly going to be on TV. The other thing is you need a place to number your storyboards. We have a film located in the back room over here that was done last year, and that film is under 3 minutes in length. And we have about, I don't know what our number's over there, but it's quite high. What's our final number? 41 boards for about a 2.5 minute film. So, and in industry, they storyboard everything. If it is going to be a movie, a cartoon, a live action film, a video game, a commercial, a music video, a website, they're all storyboarded. It is all completely planned. The other aspect that you need to make sure you have on there, besides the numbering, is your duration, your time of how long each shot is up. So you have an idea in your length, paying attention to what your storyboards are. Down below each frame that we have in here for Knick-Knack, we have a little panel. That is your information panel. I usually do 3 different things. I usually have dialogue. I usually have action, what is happening on screen. So what is being said is dialogue. Action is what is actually being seen on screen, what is going on. And then camera is the other piece of information I have on there. What type of camera shot is it? Is it a close-up? Is it a extreme close-up? If it's a master shot, and so on, so we can easily set it up. Those are the 3 basics that I use. It gets in more in depth. You can even do the type of lighting, time of day, sound effects. The more information you put on there, depending on how much is being involved in your film, the better. If you're planning it out that far, spending that much time. So if you are a director, my young filmmakers here, I ask you to spend that time in that area because it's going to make your life so much easier. And you're able to help and direct other people. It's a lot easier to show them on a piece of paper what needs to be done and send them off than it is to just describe it to them right there in the spot while you're trying to do all your other work that you're trying to get done, getting the camera set up and make sure your actors are doing what they're supposed to do. You're able to help other people on set to help you out if you have the blueprint to your film all laid out that you worked on before that. So what we're going to do next, are we on to camera shots now? Okay. So we're going to get to camera shots now, and we're going to use a trick that Miss Nylund does in her class. Yep.
Okay. So in your packet, I know you guys have a lot of things in that packet. There's print-offs of my little Google slideshow here called camera angles. So when I come into this part of the lesson, I start off by letting the students know where my philosophy about filmmaking and about understanding film comes from. That I fundamentally believe that film and media are extraordinarily powerful. That our students, our young people, the generation of students that are in school right now are more media saturated than any generation before them. And that this is such a powerful tool that it behooves us to teach them how to wield this tool responsibly and to understand that every single choice that they make in terms of where to place their camera, how to shoot something, matters, and that people make meaning out of it, whether we do it consciously or subconsciously. Film and the way that films are put together help create meaning, and it can be very, very powerful. And if you look at the history of film, this power can be used for wonderful, wonderful effects and for horrible, horrible effects. Film is that powerful. So when I first started teaching this class, they pitched it to me as, hey, film is literature. Why don't we study a couple of movies that are also books, and we'll look at it that way. And I said, okay, if I'm going to take on this class, I'm going to take it on as an introduction to cinema class, and we're going to look at aesthetics. And we're going to approach it from my background in formalist film theory. So that's where I'm coming from by going through camera angles. Let's see if this works better than the one in my class. It does. Good. Okay. So the very, very first thing that I teach my students is that the first thing we have to figure out is that framing an image is as important as your entire film. And I'm talking about every single image in their films. There's thought behind this, that when professional directors put together their storyboards, when they sit down with their cinematographers, they sit down with their production designers, you have a collaborative art form of people coming together who understand that every single frame of their film is going to help create meaning. So this is a study of what is known as mise en scène, which is a theatrical term, French theatrical term, basically meaning everything that is within the frame. That's a whole other type of study. What I'm looking at right now are camera angles. And this comes into play with what we're drawing because I have very small children, and I'm always noticing the way that they start drawing their pictures, that every single picture they draw is a full shot of a human being, usually standing next to a tree, and a disproportionately shaped house. And that's exactly how I usually approach drawing pictures. And that what we want to get our students to do is to realize that true meaning is going to come by getting in to that scene, and that not every single shot has to be a long shot or a full shot. And in fact, every single camera shot has meaning behind it and has a purpose. So some of the questions that I ask them that I ask my students when they're looking at films is, what is in the frame? I ask them to pay attention to distance. How close is the camera? How far away is the camera? How close are you, the viewer, to the subject in the scene? Are you up close? Are you neutral? Are you far away? And then I talk to them about the actual grammar of film study, that if we're going to talk about filmmaking, we have to engage in the terminology of film studies, so that an establishing shot acts like an exposition shot, that is your shot that sets the stage for your scene. And then we talk about close-ups, and that the closer the camera is to the subject, the greater the intimacy. And that when you make the choice to put a shot in a close-up, you're making a choice to get intimate, to create intimacy between the audience and the subject. A medium shot is one of the most neutral images. It doesn't cause you to feel alienated. It doesn't cause you to feel intimate. And then you have long shots or full shots that make the subject part of the physical environment of the shot or the story. And like I said, this is kind of our go-to when we don't have a lot of experience with drawing, when we don't have a lot of experience with understanding how these different shots create meaning. This is also our go-to because it's comfortable. Because when we are standing this far apart, nobody's nervous. Nobody's getting into each other's spaces. But the second that I come over here, I know her, so it's okay. I'm suddenly invading her space, and suddenly we are having a more intimate conversation. But if we have a camera set up over there, are you a part of our conversation? So if you're the camera, what do you have to do to be a part of this conversation?
I need to move closer as if the viewer is part of this conversation. So I'd move in tighter, not behind, because this would be rude trying to be part of someone's conversation back here. The idea is that you want to give a full view so I can actually stand in front, and now we're all having a conversation together. As a viewer, you don't have much words. It's just viewing and watching what's happening and hearing what they have to say, but at least our viewer is now part of the story.
And the number one mistake that my student filmmakers come to me with when they bring me their dailies and when I start looking at their footage and when they're first getting a camera in their hands, the number one mistake that they always make is that the camera is set back there and they are shooting somebody up here and the camera doesn't move the entire time. Until I talk to them about getting into their scene. That, I don't think it's my next slide, but that this, I chose this because I love The Searchers. This is one of the most famous shots of classic Western Hollywood cinema. It is also one of the most copied shots by numerous directors. And the reason I threw it in here, a couple of reasons. One, because I love it. It's Martin Scorsese's favorite movie. But it's also because this type of an image, this long shot, this full shot, is our fallback image when we first begin to draw. It's safe, it's distant, and it gives details. But in terms of narrative, as I was saying, the shot that comes after this is the cowboy walking away. And what the director, John Ford, is trying to communicate with this shot is alienation and isolation and loneliness. And most of us aren't thinking that when we draw our pictures in a long shot. We're not thinking of what it's communicating to the viewer, that it's communicating isolation and loneliness, and that most of the time that's not what our stories are about. That's not what we're trying to communicate. So the idea is that the close-up gives us so much more detail. The close-up allows us to become intimate with our subjects. And so we have intimacy versus alienation. But wait, there's more. I'm going to let you do this part.
Rule of thirds?
Yes, rule of thirds.
So, dealing with being an art teacher, rule of thirds is very important. It's dealing with balance and setting up your screen. When you're setting up shots, a typical one is to make sure that it is balanced within the screen, that your eye line is at the top third of the screen. And that's setting up for a frame. You can play with this whole concept by adjusting where your eye line is using these top thirds. By moving it lower and setting up a camera being higher creates more of a power aspect to the viewer. If you switch it where the character is higher and the camera is lower, it's giving more power to the actual character on the screen. And it's setting up the basic balance within these rules of thirds of framing your shot. So when you're looking at this, you would have 1, 2, and 3 portions for top and bottom, and then left and right. And then we moved on to Cantor for you.
Yeah. So one of the ways that the rule of thirds is really powerful is when filmmakers who really understand this rule start to play with us a little bit. And when those rules, when that rule of third is disrupted, it has an effect on us. It has an emotional effect on us as viewers. We see a scene like this, and without any narrative, without any dialogue, we know subconsciously something is not right because we feel off balance. And it really does, a lot of it goes back to the shape theory where we don't like angles. And there's all sorts of natural triangles being made here, and it doesn't make us feel good. And in fact, horror film directors bank on this. If you've ever noticed that when you're watching certain films and all of a sudden you just feel really uneasy and you're not sure why, 9 times out of 10, it's because you've got a canted angle on your hands. Somebody has tilted the camera just slightly in order to help create meaning. And then I think we just have a couple of examples. The high angle shot where whenever you have a camera stationed up here and it's shooting down here, a lot of filmmakers will do this just because it looks cool. But the purpose behind that shot is to suggest entrapment. It's to suggest, well, another word for it is the God's angle view. So it's the idea that we are powerless. So if you're using that angle, there's a reason for that angle, and it communicates something in the narrative. The low angle shot, the same thing. You have a low angle and it makes a character look larger than life, looming, terrifying in this case, that it suggests dominance and power. And then again, the canted angle, even if it's just slightly at an angle, we know that something is not right. And it's called a Dutch angle as well. And we teach these things so that when our students go to start drawing their storyboards, they understand that whatever choice they make, however large their character is, and in our case we're doing inanimate objects, so however large that subject is in the frame or however small it is in the frame, that every choice they make there is going to create meaning for the viewer, and to be aware of the type of meaning that they're creating when they make those choices.
So we're at a point now where we're probably going to break for dinner. We're going to give you some homework over the next 30 minutes while you're eating. We want you to think about that story concept that we were talking about. But we want you to find and pick an inanimate object and how it would feel for some reason. We were discussing if it was left behind or was chose over by something else. But any inanimate object, it's up to you. And start thinking about what you would do with your story. And then we can talk to each other at dinner, and we can discuss different things, and we'll go from there. What we're going to do is we ask you to do some homework, and we ask you to come up with an inanimate object, and using Karen's story method that we had you write down for knickknacks, which was the outline that we did showing professional film, We want you to use that for your inanimate object as if it came alive. Now, we're going to have you do what are called thumbnails first. You have this large piece of white paper that's in front of you. And you're going to get an opportunity. Remember, in thumbnails, it is just rough drawing. Deal with basic shapes. Let me hear some of your guys' inanimate objects. What are some of the inanimate objects you picked? Yes?
A loner sock. Like
A loner sock. That's perfect. I love that one. So we just have this long tube that's just going to move. It's a basic shape. Love it. Yes?
A cell phone, since they're always coming out with new models.
Ah, that's great. So perfect. And we just need, if you're going to do a cell phone, it is just a rectangle. Is it any particular type model, or you can have Siri cry? So it's just do a rectangle, and you might have a little button down on the end of it or something along those lines, just so it IDs as a phone. Perfect. Yes?
Name tag.
Name tag. Yeah, the welcome name tags. And all the name tags you guys got on right now. Hello, my name is. And so,
young filmmakers.
yes, let me hear from
Any ideas?
skateboard. Nice. So are you a longboarder, or are you just regular? Okay, so what type of shape do you do for your skateboard? Just a popsicle stick. Absolutely correct. Perfect. Yes. So we could do these shapes. Anyone else want to share? Okay, so as you can see, we're just looking for basic shapes. And you're going to, even though you didn't share with your ideas, we're going to ask you to do these thumbnails, and Miss Nylund has a way for us to get the thumbnails going.
So this is the way that Sully makes fun of me over, because it is my very low-tech way of getting my students to do storyboards. It's also much bigger than the thumbnails on the storyboard handout that you have. All we do is start out by folding a large piece of construction paper so that we have a rectangular frame. And granted, this is a whole lot of frames here.
We got paper coming around. This is our difference.
Yes.
I gave you my thumbnail sheets.
This
That's
is
her
what I
thumbnail
like to call
sheets.
differentiating instruction, however, so that English teachers who do not have all the fancy equipment in front of them are able to do this with their classes as well. So there.
So there you go. But I also printed everyone up a thumbnail sheet of mine if you want it. I'll pass it
You
out
don't
to you.
have to use mine.
They do now since they folded it.
That's true. Now they're going to feel compelled. It won't hurt my feelings if you don't use mine. But like I said, embracing low tech as well as high tech.
How to do it. Now, I'm working with sixth graders.
Right.
So,
But I would highly recommend the process we're doing here
okay,
is a way for them to tell the story.
okay.
And so you don't have to have everything moving. They can do some things that move, and there's things that are called, cycle animation, where they just do a few drawings and that repeats over and over and over, and it gives that illusion that it's moving. And so like with a bee, you can have the wings just moving really fast.
Right, it doesn't have to be,
It doesn't have to have tons of stuff to it.
right, okay.
All right, so you have your
Yeah, that's one of my students' ones.
your folded piece of paper for your thumbnails. Whenever we do a story, if I ask someone to tell me a story, we have no problem. We'll talk it through very easily. It's just like, oh, so there's this guy that got bitten by a spider and beat up this guy that was rich and had a lot of toys. And the other guy drove up in his car, and when he jumped out of his car, the teenager was whining because he lost his date to the prom. We can talk that through over and over and over about the process. But the key thing that you need to remember is if you are saying it out loud in your head, say for example, I am doing a storyboard about me and I'm giving a lecture, and it's very important that you take your thumbnails. And I reach over and pick up thumbnails and start off with an establishing shot. Now, you don't necessarily have to start with an establishing shot. If I was actually to storyboard this, it would be me standing up front here, and I said, you need to start off with your thumbnails. Well, I reached for my thumbnails. I said, you need to reach for your thumbnails. So the shot would be me first, and then the next thing I said is reach for thumbnails. I need a shot of what I'm reaching for, the object of what I'm doing, then hand grabbing it, so it's a close-up, and then coming back. And then you need to make sure you start off with an establishing shot. and then we go to an establishing shot of showing who I'm talking to and who's in the classroom and what am I teaching to. So I can start off, establishing shots does not necessarily have to start at the beginning, but it has to show what is around towards the front of your film and what's going on. So if you're going to say it in words, you got to show it in a frame. Does that make sense? So, and then you have to show where your character is in relationship to the rest of the world. And that would be the first part of starting off with a story visually. So if you're dealing with a sock, you're dealing with a baseball, a skateboard, whatever it is, we got to decide how we're going to bring the audience in visually. What are we going to show first? And what is our story about? And we're going to give you about, what do we say, 10, 15 minutes, somewhere in there?
Let's start with 10.
10 minutes to jot down your shapes that represent your basic story. And then we're going to get into small groups, and you're going to pitch your idea to each other. Okay? You're going to share out. So there you go. We'll walk around and help you. If you have any questions, we'll be more than happy to help you and do things. So does anyone have any questions, need help right now? Then we're going to let you guys get to work. We're going to show some student examples. And
The first one that I'm going to that we're going to show you is called Eggtopia. And what I like about this one, and the reason I'm starting with this one, going back to my whole idea that you can even do this with construction paper. You don't need, I mean, yes, these are great, but we can have our students do these even on construction paper. Again, you know, I'm in the English department, so I don't have a lot of the technology in front of me. But what all of the kids have in common is that they all have access to PowerPoint. And so what my students did with this project was they took photos. Well, first, excuse me, let me backtrack. First, they wrote a very basic script of what the story was following the narrative paradigm. Then they went and they drew their pictures on a piece of paper just like this. And then they went out and they took photographs of their story from the inanimate object's perspective, and they loaded it up into PowerPoint and put it together like a storyboard so that you could hit play and just watch it like a little story. So that's what this one is.
there you go.
So that's one of them. So basically what they did was they put their photos into PowerPoint, and then the next step that year, before we were using the equipment in here, they put it into Microsoft Movie Maker, and most of the students made their photos black and white, and then they found music from this awesome website called, I'm forgetting the name of it, royaltyfreemusic.com, that has music that sounds like silent film music, the old piano that used to play during the silent film era. And then they laid that track over it so it looked like these cute little silent film shorts. And then what our students did this year was that they came into Mr. Sullivan's studio, and they used, what is the program?
We use Storyboard Pro.
Storyboard Pro.
So Storyboard Pro is a professional grade software that allows you to storyboard, plus allows you to do the timing and make story reels, so all the editing stuff is all in one. You don't need Storyboard Pro to be able to do what we're doing here. You see, we've done from PowerPoint. If you have Windows Movie Maker, if you have, iMovie, any of that stuff where you can just bring images in, you drag and drop into your work bin and you put it onto your timeline. You can import audio, and then you just match up your images and your timing to that audio, and you'll be able to tell your story. The more pictures you have, the more it feels of motion. So you can do multiple shots. Some of the questions were, how can we get things to look like it is moving? You saw in the storyboard process that Joe Ramp drew, where it showed the guy's hand moving back and forth. It was just 2 drawings that was repeated over and over for about 4 seconds to give that illusion that he was writing as he was doing. So you can do this, what's called cycle animation, repeating images back and forth to give that idea that it is alive. So these are all process. Which one would you want to show next?
I think Alexis.
So we traded off 2 times a week is basically what we did. Tuesdays and Thursdays we would switch classes, and they did 3 weeks for this is basically when they started. So you're talking 6 class periods. We're an hour and a half long to give you an idea of the length of just putting something like this together. What would you like to show next, Ms. Nylund?
I think we're running short on time. Do we want to
We
check
wanna do
in
some-
with our
Yeah,
with
so we're close
pictures?
to. Did you guys see some people out there you wanted to?
I saw, well, in the interest of time, I don't know that we would get to do this, but I saw a number of different really good ideas that had to do with pencils. And so ideally, if we were sitting in my class right now and I saw that many different ideas having to do with pencils, and pencils that want different things and have different conflicts, what I would do in that situation is put all of the pencil people together to brainstorm to come up with the strongest conflict, the strongest desires, the strongest complications, the strongest climax, to have them pull all of those great ideas together to build one awesome idea.
Yes.
That's what I would do.
To create story, you can't live in a vacuum. You have to talk, share, say it over and over and over. What we normally do at this time is that we would have students give what are called pitches. They would stand up in front of the class and they would go through each image telling their story visually. And then we get into a critique situation at the end of that to talk about the shots. We call it plussing. We talk about the things that we like. We always start off there with the things that we like in our critiquing, and then we get into what we would do to make it better. And that's always the language we go through. If I was to do this film, this is what I would add to it. And what that allows is for the artist, the filmmaker, to take the ideas that they like and use them and ignore the other ones that they didn't want to do, and just we're trying to help each other become better filmmakers. And the whole team relies on each other to become stronger in this part. And if you just do it by yourself, it's really hard. You can do it, it just takes longer. You got to make a lot more films. Chuck Jones says everyone has 1,000 bad drawings in them, and you have to just work to get them out. So I feel the same thing about films. We all have bad films in us. We just got to make a bunch over and over and over just to get better. And that's the best way of doing it, because you learn from every single project. Another thing we say to our students all the time is that films never get done, they escape. You got to let them go. There's a point when you just have to cut it off. and it's time to start working on a new one. So, or they will work forever on a film.
Right.
And
Which is why we see director's cuts of things
That's
that
right.
aren't necessarily
so,
better or even as good as the original.
oh, this hour went really fast. Is it time?
It did. It went really fast. Yeah,
So.
I think it is.
All right, does anyone have any questions? Now, I strongly believe in Sacramento Education Cable Consortium and everything that they do, and the SEVAs I think are a wonderful program for the youth to be a part of and for teachers to be a part of. I believe in it so much that I want to continue helping. I love doing this stuff for them. I love teaching these classes, but it doesn't stop here. It doesn't stop when the clock hits 7. I will continue working with anybody that wants to work on film or learn about art or learn about animation. I will put up my email and my contact information. You are more than welcome to contact me, and I can share with you. You can come back another time and visit the studio and hang out and see what we do here. You're welcome to look around the room. We have a film that we did from last year. In the middle of the room is our new film that we're working on, is all the concept work. And that's the film that we're working with Samantha Skyler on. So you can take a look at that. That's a sneak peek at what's going on for this year. And so I want to thank all of you on behalf of my fellow teachers that are with me for coming out tonight and being a part of this. Thank you so much for being here. Give yourself a hand.